talk to me about how these two kind of contradicting laws can coexist.
So what we have here are two laws, one which is a state law and one which is a town charter. And when the town charter was enacted, it seems to conflict with what the state law says. Now the question is whether the two can be read in harmony with each other. If they conflict, then the court needs to decide which law applies in this situation. So we have a state law which was enacted almost 60 years ago, and then we have a home rule charter which was enacted in 2009. When that charter was enacted, the intent may have been to repeal anything in conflict with the state law. However, it wasn't expressly repealed. So now we have two laws which seem to be in conflict with each other.
What do you think will rule, I guess, when the Supreme Court takes a look at this?
Generally, when you have this situation, the state law is going to trump the town or city law, because towns and cities at the end of the day are just creatures of the state.
Okay, so Clay Johnson, the guy they appointed, would likely stay in that position.
That's correct.
Okay. Have you ever seen anything like this, or how common is something like this to occur?
There have been situations where this has happened in the past. It's not very common, but it does happen. I think part of the issue here is that while we're dealing with conflicting laws and a legal analysis, from a boots on the ground standpoint, there's a feeling that the will of the voters isn't being recognized here. And that shouldn't be lost in this.
Is there a future where they could come together with the two laws coexisting?
There could be further legislative action to try to make these laws meld together or to repeal the Chariho Act the correct way. But until that happens, the town is going to be bound by the decision of the Supreme Court.
Could we see, so say they rule in favor of the state, the Chariho Act wins, Clay Johnson stays in the seat. Do you think from a legal standpoint that could pose issues from voters, like you mentioned, that feel like, well, hey, Jessica Purcell was the next person in line, our votes aren't being heard, or our voices aren't being heard?
I think that's something that they may take to the legislature and try to change this in the future so that their voices are heard if this were to occur again.
Okay, so it's nothing they could really do right now. Clay Johnson would stay in that seat.
He likely would.
And then they would kind of just hope in the future remedy it so it doesn't happen again.
Exactly. There's a further issue here where there's a question about if the votes are taken and Mr. Johnson remains in that seat and the Supreme Court finds that Ms. Purcell should be in the seat, do they have to go back now and redo all of those votes and redo all of their work? If they did come down and put her in that seat, though, and Mr. Johnson was a determinative vote in any of these issues, they would probably have to go back and redo them.